Alabama's member of the House of Representatives, Bradley Byrne, is running for U.S. Senate, leaving the Alabama 1st District congressional seat open for just the third time in the last 34 years. 5 Republicans are vying for the job that's been in the hands of the GOP since 1965. Former intelligence officer John Castorani, Mobile County Commissioner Jerry Carl, former state senator Bill Hightower, businessman Wes Lambert, and State Rep Chris Pringle discuss the issues crucial to the country and Lower Alabama. It's live right now from the Chickasaw Municipal Auditorium, only on News 5. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Davis Municipal Auditorium in Chickasaw for tonight's Republican congressional debate. I'm News 5's Peter Albrecht, along with Roseanne Haven and FM Talk 106.5's Sean Sullivan, and we thank you very much for joining us, whether you're here in the audience tonight in Chickasaw, whether you're watching on News 5 or streaming on WKRG.com or listening on FM Talk 106.5. Right now, Sean is going to go over tonight's rules.
All right, so no opening or closing statements and 1 minute to 30-second answer for each candidate. A 30-second rebuttal will be only allowed and by the sole discretion of the moderators, and only if a candidate is specifically addressed an opponent in their answer. The first question will be answered in alphabetical order by last name. That order will rotate after that for a 5-question series. Then the process will be reversed alphabetical as we move through the questions. The questions have been established by WKRG News 5 and FM Talk 106.5 and are not known to the candidates prior to the debate. Questions submitted to Facebook by Facebook viewers may be asked in the final 30 minutes of the debate.
All right, and we have put our candidates on the podium and on your screen tonight, alphabetical order, left to right, and I'll introduce them quickly. From left to right, Jerry Carl, John Castorani, Bill Hightower, Wes Lambert, and Chris Pringle. And we'll ask our audience here tonight in the auditorium for their decorum and no applause, please, as we proceed with the debate. And we're off and running here. Sean, you've got the first question.
All right, and what accomplishments in your political or professional career set you apart from your opponents and demonstrate that you're the best candidate for the job? Jerry Carl?
Thank you. You know, my background being in business, I would say my biggest accomplishment has been economic development and projects that have been brought to Mobile, and also projects that we had here that we actually expanded with. Projects like also shipbuilding, Airbus, expansion of the 220. Most people probably don't realize when that 220 hits capacity, we're going to be the 4th largest airplane producer in the world. Amazon at their center out in Theodore, and also the Walmart Distribution Center. That Walmart Distribution Center is 1,000 employees, full-time employees that are great jobs, and that was one of the projects that I really put my heart and soul into. So that's quite an accomplishment. When I took office, the unemployment rate was 13%, a little over 13%, and now it's a little under 3%. So I think I played a little bit of a role in that.
All right, John Castorani.
Yes, thank you. As the only veteran running on the Republican ticket, my best accomplishment, I would say, is as a veteran, being able to work with all races, all religious backgrounds in order to accomplish one focal mission. If you don't accomplish that mission together and come together and work together, then the worst could happen, including death to people that you love and people that you care about. Second to that, my time in the intelligence community, I understand technologies that exist, especially as President Trump pushes us to get out of these endless wars that I've served in personally. A lot of those contractors and intel professionals are going to need new jobs. So I would know how to leverage those technologies and hopefully bring some new jobs to the Mobile area, because those jobs can strengthen our borders and strengthen our coasts.
All right.
Thank you.
Bill Hightower.
Thank you, WKRG. Thank you, 106.5. Thank you, the Mobile County Republicans, who have been the leader on this event. It's great to be with you tonight. As a state legislator, I fought for a lot of things for our coast, everything from being pro-life to religious liberties, but also securing the BP funds for our coast and in seeking lower taxes to lower the tax burden on Alabama's coast. It's been my focus, the coast has, because I've represented you here. But before I was a legislator, I worked for large companies around the globe. In that, I learned how businesses operate and what they're looking for. And I want to bring that expertise to recruit more companies to our district. But I also want to take the values as an Alabama State Senator, things you can see on my record. I'm going to take that to Washington, D.C. to represent you well.
Thank you. Wes Lambert.
Yes, sir. Thank you all for having us tonight. My background consists of several businesses we've opened on the Gulf Coast, and I've created more than 500 jobs for our community. And over $10 million I've created through our restaurants, the Dumbwaiter restaurant, and our relocation business, to equal over $1 million in taxes we've paid to the community. So when it comes to creating jobs, I'm pretty good at it. And I've been very successful in one of the hardest industries in the world and never doing it before, being the restaurant business. So me going to Congress, I feel like business people should be in Congress, being the largest business in the world.
All right, thank you. And Chris Pringle.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate you doing this tonight. As you well know, I was first elected to the Alabama House in 1994. And during my first term, I was elected by my colleagues to be the minority leader of the House. Then I left the legislature and spent 12 years working on my business. I work for Southern Timberlands. I do timberland sales and acquisitions. And I'm a licensed home builder and a licensed general contractor. I understand fundamentally what it takes to sign the front of the checks at the end of the week, because the people that work for me are dependent on those checks that I sign for them. And I understand what it's like to live under all the rules and regulations the government places on small businesses every day. After 12 years of being out of public office, I returned to the Alabama House of Representatives, and I hold the record. I've repealed 350 laws and done away with 77 different state boards, agencies, and commissions. And I currently serve as chairman of the Reapportionment Committee and chairman of the State Government Committee. I have a 100% pro-life voting record, and my pro-life stance, that is not a political stance.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been asking our News 5 viewers and listeners to 106.5 to send in their questions. We want to know what the audience wants to hear from these candidates tonight, and News 5's Roseanne Haven is standing by now with one of those viewers and listeners.
Yes, Pete, with me now, joining us from our audience is David Preston from Mobile, and you have a question regarding free trade.
Yes, ma'am. Alabama is a net beneficiary of foreign investment with open trade, as evident within foreign investments like Austal and Airbus here in the 1st District. Airbus recently said that it was hard to invest in Mobile during a trade war. If elected to the 1st Congressional District as a congressman, what would you do to work with the administration and the president to spare companies that have foreign investments in Alabama's economy from trade wars with partners like Europe and Canada, who are our friends?
All right, David, thank you so much for the question. And John Castrani, you answer this one first.
Yeah, David, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. So first and foremost, I support President Trump and his agenda. But I'm going to have to side with South Alabama, Southwest Alabama. You guys will be the constituents. You guys are the priority. Of course, I would be an advocate, a tireless advocate for South Alabama, realizing that Boeing has grounded the 737 MAX. FAA has restricted that. The A320 is the competitor for the 737 MAX. We need to advocate, hand over fist, advocate and fight to get more sales of the A320 and to make sure that we're not affected by tariffs here, and make sure Airbus isn't affected by tariffs here. And I would be probably your best advocate. I'm a proven fighter as a veteran. But thank you for that. That was a great question, David. Thank you.
Mr. Hightower.
I'm going to protect our industries on the coast here and throughout Alabama. Let's be very clear about that. But it's very important for us to get this China trade deal in place, and I'm going to support President Trump to do it. But what China is doing is they're using our capital markets and our bond markets to fund technologies, to build their military in the South China Sea, to build their rocket capability in North Korea. This is more than just farming issues. And I, by the way, appreciate our patriot farmers who are willing to take it on the chin because they know it's right. I've worked in China. I know how they operate, and I've seen how Trump has masterfully dealt with them. But we need to get that trade deal in place, and we also need to get the NAFTA replacement in place. If we do that, ladies and gentlemen, our economy is going to continue to grow. That's suppressing things right now. But I'm going to support our local industry, just like Richard Shelby did and Bradley Byrne did when they protected Airbus against those tariffs.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes, sir. Great question, David. We all believe in free trade. We all want to protect our industries down here. I think we need to protect our industries not only here, but other aspects of Alabama and the United States. And NAFTA's been sitting with the Democrats for the last 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and is not going anywhere because of the impeachment process. I believe in the free trade. I believe that needs to get done, the North American Free Trade Agreement. And I believe as soon as we get that done, we'll see, in our industry, we'll be able to get better pricing on products as well coming from Mexico. And you'll see better prices on a lot of other products coming from other parts because they're able to ship it for free. So, thank you.
Mr. Pringle.
Thank you. I support President Trump's America First agenda, but we are a port city. A lot of our economy is based on trade, and I support open but fair trade with our trading partners, and right now we don't have that with China. But what's important is to keep in mind our number one responsibility is to protect the workers here in the United States. And that was done during this latest trade war. As you know, Airbus was exempt from the tariffs, protecting the jobs we have here in Alabama. But I think President Trump is on the right track when it's negotiating fair trade agreements that treat us on parity, where China's been ripping us off for years. We need a strong president who will stand up for our rights and our workers.
Mr. Carl.
All right. Well, I have been involved in the Airbus. I was involved in writing a letter to President Trump that got those tariffs held up temporarily. So Airbus is extremely important in this community as well as so many other companies. But we have to focus on our local farmers. I know that was mentioned. Our farmers are taking it on the chin. They're getting half the price they got for cotton last year because there's just not enough demand. Our steel, the tariffs on our steel have affected us on the port. I sit on the Port Authority. I get to see the numbers coming in and out of the port, so I understand that too. But as America, we have to stand with the president. We have to stand against this unfair balance that we have with China. I think we see that end results about to take place, and what I base that on is the economy and the stock market. The economy's booming, the stock market's booming. The stock market, you follow the stock market, they'll tell you what's happening in negotiations with China, and it's positive.
All right, our next question concerns the I-10 Bayway Bridge project. How important is it to build a new bridge and expand the Bayway? And what would you do specifically to secure federal funds so that there would be no toll or a minimal toll if the bridge is ever built? And Mr. Hightower, you're first.
I've been very clear. I've been against the toll, but I'm definitely for that bridge. We've got to fix that problem. Everybody knows as they try to go to the beach and try to come back, and we can. You see, the equation's pretty simple. You either got to lower the cost or raise the availability of financing without a toll. And we can do that. There are plans already being considered. And the engineering companies in our city have done a marvelous job of trying to create alternatives. So what is my role? My role in Washington, D.C. is to make sure that bridge is funded, and funded properly so we don't have a toll. I've got a history of working together with people and bringing people around the table to solve problems in the corporate world, but also in the political world. And I'll do that as we approach this issue that we need to solve for our commerce, for our distribution, our tremendous supply chain along the coast. We've got to solve this problem, and I will do so if I go to Washington, D.C.
Mr. Lambert?
I believe the first thing you do when you get to D.C. is get with Mitch McConnell and get on the infrastructure committee. From there, your first trip, you bring some of your committee members down between June and August and let them look at our bridge. And from that point, they'll understand the necessity it is for us. And you go back to Washington, and then they know the problem we're having, and now we can look at raising money. And from there, we can get that into an infrastructure bill. And the second will be a Go Mesa cap. There's a cap on Go Mesa at $375 million. If we can take that cap off, we'll be able to, hopefully, federal will let us use some of that money to help build our bridge.
Mr. Pringle.
As you well know, I was adamantly opposed to the toll that was proposed because the last proposal was just far too expensive. But we still have an opportunity to build a bridge, and a bridge that we need. There's $127 million still earmarked in the federal budget for that bridge. And the environmental impact, the environmental permits are still intact. And there is a plan being floated around to build a bridge that will greatly reduce cost. We need a federal infrastructure plan. Nancy Pelosi, if you remember, I went to Nancy Pelosi's office to ask her personally why she won't pass President Trump's 5-year infrastructure plan, why she's letting it sit on her desk. We need that plan because we need the funds to build a bridge. And as your next congressman, I will work tirelessly to see that we get the funding necessary to build a bridge without tolling our local citizens to build it. It is a federal road, and it should be paid for with federal funds.
Mr. Carl.
I was part of that committee also. I helped pull the project when we found out it was being tolled. We actually pulled it. We were part of the process. We need the bridge. There's no argument about that. There's never been an argument about the need, but the problem has been the tolling. We've got to figure out a way of doing it without tolling. We do have a plan that's going to be launched here in about 2 weeks that I looked at yesterday. It's actually a downsize of the project. We're going to actually look at building a bridge and not the Bayway. The Bayway will actually be phase 2. I'm part of that project too, so I know quite a bit about the Bayway, and the toll is not an option.
Mr. Castellani?
Yes, so it's been addressed that it's an infrastructure funding problem. If we continue to allow career politicians who put their own self-interest first and allow them to get into Congress, and I'm hoping that 2020 saw in 2016 with President Trump being elected as a political outsider, I'm confident that a younger generation that can work together with individuals can put the people of the federal government first and get an infrastructure bill passed. That's the first issue. The second issue is I signed the American Taxpayer Protection Pledge. I will never vote on anything that raises your taxes, and I stand by that. I made a modest salary. I didn't like paying taxes when I lived in Northern Virginia working for the intelligence community, and I saw the cost of this bridge in over $1 billion. Whatever the number is, it's over $1 billion, and that's unfair for all of the citizens in Baldwin County that commute to Mobile to work and the citizens in Mobile County that commute to Baldwin County to work. And I strongly stand against a toll. This has to come from federal money. You pay your federal taxes already. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And we've heard from all the candidates so far your support for President Trump. But let's flip things around for a second here. What policies or personal traits of the president do you oppose, or under what circumstances would you oppose the president if you were elected? Mr. Lampert?
Of course, that's me first, isn't it?
It is. It is.
So, you know, I think the president's done a great job. And I think he came in the time that we needed him because we were so far left. And we needed someone to bring us back to the right somewhat. And I think he was the right one. I think he's got the business mind that we need up there. You know, policies, stay off Twitter a little bit, maybe. But policies, I agree with a lot that he does because he's a business person. And I voted for President Trump in the primary. And the main reason I did was because he was a business person. And I felt like we needed that aspect or that knowledge at the time where our economy was lacking. And we can prove now that, you know, everything he's set forward to with the economy has proven to work so far. So,
thank you. Mr. Pringle.
I think President Trump is here at the right time. I think we needed somebody to go to Washington and shake things up and change the debate in Washington. And he's a businessman, and he's a New York businessman. And if you push him, he's going to push back harder, and he negotiates like a New York businessman does. You know, the job of the congressman is to represent the people back home. That is our job. We're the person that goes to Washington and advocates for the people back home. And while I support the president, my support will end if he's doing something that I think that doesn't help us in Southwest Alabama. It doesn't represent our values or our needs here in the 1st Congressional District.
Thank you. Mr. Carl.
You know, I agree on the Twitter account. The first thing I oppose is the Twitter account. I think we would be so much better off if we weren't putting everything out there on social media. But that is the president's style, and it works for President Trump. None of us on this stage will get away with that, I'll assure you that. But, you know, on the positive side, what the president has done is stir the swamp. And that's what he told us he was going to do going in there, and he has done it. And we're seeing the results from that. We see the impeachment that's coming up, and I'm sure that's going to be one of the questions here, so I'm not going to roll into that too much. But the impeachment process, that's all about stirring the swamp up. He is an outsider. He's involved in a mess up there, and we've got to send some people up there to actually support him and give him good advice. Give him honest advice. Don't tell him what he wants to hear. Tell him what he needs to hear behind closed doors. And I'm the man to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Castrani.
So I'm probably the only one that agrees that sometimes I like when he tweets, just to be honest with you. I like a president that says what's on his mind. He's my president, not my preacher, right? I just wish he'd stay off of the classified information sometimes on Twitter, but that's his right being the president. I will disagree with President Trump on one thing. We do need to secure our border. We don't have to build a border wall to do that. If we're pulling out of Afghanistan, we're pulling out of Somalia, there are remote sensing technologies that we can use on the border, right? We will build a border wall in these cities like El Paso, San Diego. You know, we will build border walls there, and we'll also use remote sensing technologies. But you're going to have an influx of contractors and military personnel that really don't have a job without these wars. And they have top secret security clearances, so it's not going to be high crime, and those jobs can be monitored from everywhere. And there is some available sensitive compartmentalized information facility, a SCIF space in Mobile at the Gulf Coast Task Force would be perfect for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hightower.
President Trump has exhibited such strength on things like pro-life, pro-Israel, lower taxes, stronger economy. Now, I as an Alabama state senator, I was voted consistently as the most conservative Alabama state senator, one of the top conservative senators. Those values, they may not be popular, but they work. Conservatism works. And that's what I see President Trump doing. He's implementing these things. What would I work against him for? If he took any of these, I can't compromise on pro-life. I cannot compromise on religious liberty. President Trump hadn't either. But if he did, I'd oppose him in his face. There's no problem there. I'm for him because he's getting the results, ladies and gentlemen. Low unemployment, higher GDP. We're winning on the front. There's so many. It's incredible. People have jobs. I want to support a president like that. We hadn't had one like that in a long time.
We'll go on to our next question now and talk about federal spending. Fiscal conservatism is supposed to be a fundamental value of the Republican Party, and yet in the last 3 years, we've been running up some of the largest deficits in the history of the nation. Do you oppose deficit spending, and if so, what would you cut or what taxes would you raise to balance the budget? And Mr. Pringle, you're first.
You know, when Ronald Reagan reduced our taxes, they called it voodoo economics. And when President Kennedy reduced taxes, they called it Camelot. When President Trump reduced taxes, if you reduce the marginal rate of taxation, you stimulate the economy. Jobs are created. People go to work. People go to work, they pay more taxes. That's the way you increase tax revenue to government, by reducing the marginal rate of taxation. Congress has not passed a budget in years. They need to go to work. They need to vote on the 13 appropriation bills that constitute the budget of the United States, and quit passing these continuing resolutions that just say we're going to keep spending money until we figure out what to do. In order to instill fiscal responsibility, each member of Congress needs to cast a vote in favor, for, or against appropriation bills. We need to know where each member stands on every appropriation bills and build a budget, and then start looking at those budgets in order to cut.
Mr. Carl.
You know, to understand how to fix it, you got to figure out where we're at. Where we're at right now, we're roughly about $22 trillion in debt. And put that in some type of visual form. You take $22 trillion and you stack them on top of one another. You can circle the earth 58 times. You can go to the moon and back 3.5 times. So that's a lot of dollars. How do you fix it? We have got to sit down with a budget. We have got to start trimming on some of these social programs that we've got. Being involved in local government, I see so much of it. It's so much waste. The federal system throws money out there that should not even be spent on some programs. Some need it. I'm not saying trash them all. There are some that truly benefit communities like this, especially when you start talking about law enforcement. But we've got to start focusing on, we don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem. So let's focus on the spending versus the revenue.
Mr. Castrani.
Absolutely. So Congress hasn't passed a budget without a continuing resolution since 1996. That's the year that they put in process this new process of how to pass that budget. The main issue, and I can go for days about both of these issues, you guys can check my website out for more information. The main issue we need to look at are federally backed student loans. That is a huge burden to the taxpayers. I'm never going to raise your taxes, and I don't want you guys to be burdened for that. I think we give that to the free market, and we let banks loan those out like it's supposed to be done, and we don't back that anymore. The second part of that is the Humana TRICARE portion, where we've got veterans coming off of active duty without serving the full 20 years, and they're kind of just left to their own devices when it comes to health care. So maybe we need to look at investing in health care savings accounts for those veterans. Like I said, I can go in for days, but it's all about limiting our spending, and I oppose strongly a deficit. And I think another issue is I don't think any of the congressmen, or very few, have lived paycheck to paycheck or had to do their own budget. You know, they have fiduciaries and CPAs that do it for them, so why would we trust them to budget our country?
Mr. Hightower.
As an Alabama state senator, I've fought for accountable government, transparent government, and limited government. We need some of that in Washington, D.C. There's definitely things we can do to lower the expense. Smaller government implies less of the cost. Things like looking at eliminating the Export-Import Bank. What about things like what President Trump did is stop aid to the PLO because it was just lining the pockets of the Palestinian Authority with their lavish lifestyle and not helping the real people on the ground. Or things like funding the mating habits of frogs in Peru that cost $400,000. I mean, do you want to go into debt over things like this? I certainly don't. And one of my roles in Washington is going to be to shine the light on that and stop that foolish spending. That would be the first step so we could be responsible with the tax dollars we're sending to Washington, D.C.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes, sir. Comes back to business and being in business. Next week I'm doing my budget for the following year. It's something when you're in business you have to do every year to make sure that you're able to make money, keep jobs, and keep growth. There's areas of the federal government we can cut. Grants is one of them, just like Mr. Hightower was speaking about. There's so many grants out there that almost anybody can get one. Another area that we need to cut is money we give to other countries. If we can bring that $1 billion, $2 billion, $3 billion back to our country, I think it would make a big difference. And we can take care of our people and make sure we're secure in what we do here and quit taking care of the rest of the world and focus on our own in America. So, thank you.
And before we take a short break, let's check in with Roseanne.
That's right. We've been listening to our candidates answer a lot of good questions, but you out there in listening on the radio or television or on Facebook have a chance to ask these candidates questions as well. We encourage you to submit those online on Facebook. At 7 o'clock, we will sign off, but we will continue this debate on FM Talk 106.5 and WKRG.com and Facebook. For now, we are going to take a quick break. When we come back, more local election coverage you can count on.